Batia, it's so great to catch up with you again today. It's been a few years since I visited all of you out at NYU, so it's great to be able to connect again today.
Thank you so much for making the connection, and I'm really looking forward to having a chance to chat.
Well, as you think back on your research, are there one to two lessons you've learned that you'd most like to pass on to others?
Yes, definitely. And probably the first one that I've used all the time in my work life as well as my home life is to explain why, whether it's when you're making a request or describing your own decisions or your actions, explain to people, to whoever it is that you're talking to, why you're making the request, why you came to that decision, why you're taking the action that you're taking. And the reasons for that are because of the value that it creates for others and the value it creates for you. And so, in terms of the value that it creates for others, when people are given an explanation of why, then they feel like you're being fair and they feel respected, that it signals something, a sign of respect to them that you feel like you need to explain. You want to give them a justification. So it's one of the ways of elevating others from a status perspective and giving them a sense of respect. It also educates and empowers them by providing the information that allows them to take more independent actions. So maybe they can come up with, if you explained why, you say you ask someone to do something, empty the dishwasher, or will you take on this project? And you explain why you chose them. So I want you to take on this project because you have these skills and you can develop these new skills by taking on this project. And then all of a sudden they understand, okay, this is what this is about. This is what I'm supposed to be getting out of this. Or maybe they come up with better means to the same end. So we are having guests over, so I want you to empty the dishwasher because we're having guests over. Well, the dishwasher is not something they're going to see, but here's this other thing that is really important that they would be able to see. Here's something that I can do more immediately, and so it lets them come up with better means to the same ends that might even satisfy your goals, your ultimate goals, even better than the ideas that you had. It also creates value to others by providing a sense of meaning and shared reality that helps people see how their actions are tied to maybe larger and shared goals. And that is something that we see. It's especially important now, especially important in a remote work context, important when this kind of the current generation that's entering and really filling out the workforce is questioning meaning and purpose and wants to be doing work that has that meaning and purpose front and center. And it's not always easy to see what's the connection between the work that they're doing and the larger goals. And so providing that explanation of why, keeping people focused on here are the larger goals, this is what we are all about, really helps people understand why what they're doing is important. And it kind of imbues their work with that sense of importance and a connection to these larger goals. And it also people also find advice. This is one of the things that I found in my research. When you're giving advice and you explain why, here's what I think you should do, and here's why I think you should do it, then inherently that advice is more abstract. And it is therefore more generalizable. It's something that they could apply in that context and in other contexts. And they find it more helpful in the research that I've done. They find it more helpful than more concrete advice. and they're more likely to take it. So that actually kind of raises the value to you of explaining why. So when you explain why, then it forces you to focus your attention on the big picture and what your overarching goals are. It forces you to prioritize and align your efforts with the things that really matter to you, or at least be aware. Sometimes explaining why, you realize, okay, I'm going to do this because it's urgent or because there's no way out of it, but there's a trade-off here. And if I explain why, then I know what the trade-off is. And if you're aware of those trade-offs, then going into the future, you can come up with ways of, maybe make rebalancing. So, resolving the trade-off in ways that benefit whatever goals you sort of forsook in the prior version. And like, especially, for example, whether it's urgent versus what's more important, you can make clearer sense of what are the trade-offs between those. You also will be viewed as more strategic and more respected and more fair. And people are less likely to resist a decision or action or request when they understand the why of it, which is kind of, some of Ellen Langer's, some of my favorite work is even giving people, I'm here in New York City, and kind of one of my favorite studies is, there were she sent some doctoral students to go on the New York City subway and ask people to get up from their seat, people who were sitting down. She would have people come up to them and say, would you get up? And found that in general, when people on the New York City subway, your image in the New York City subway, when you get asked, will you get up? People are like, WTF, so definitely not. But if you say, will you get up so I can sit down, which is the assumption, that's,
Already implied.
there's no more information there. But when you say it that way, then all of a sudden, a majority of people were willing to get up. And then the question is, why were they more willing to get up? And they filled in the blanks. So when you give people a reason why, then they kind of fill in the blanks and think, oh, well, this person must really need a seat, they must not be feeling well, or maybe there's something going on, that there is a true need, and they feel better about doing it, when they do it. So it's just got all of these benefits. There is a downside, though, that I found with this lesson, that is coming up as my most recent research. A lot of it is on artificial intelligence and these AI systems that are being used as decision support and stuff like that. And the problem with all AI systems, as we're learning with ChatGPT, is that all of them make errors. And so there is no perfect AI system. And one of the problems then is that people can over rely on AI systems. So basically follow AI advice even when it is wrong, even when they would have otherwise not made that mistake. If they didn't have the AI, they never would have done never would have made that decision. But because of the AI, they make that decision. And they're much more likely to over rely on AI when it is explainable. So when we keep asking for AI that offers an explanation of how it came to its decision. But the problem is that there is a downside to explainable AI. People feel like they understand it better. And when they understand it better, they'll follow it even when it goes against their best judgment. So maybe that's my first lesson.
It's just amazing that we don't explain our reasoning more often, because as you're describing all of these benefits, it's just like so clearly important. But it's amazing that we don't do it. And I love this lesson because it's perfect for this podcast. Simple, practical, underappreciated. In my leadership class, we do this exercise where basically divide the class in two, and one is managers and one is employees, and the managers are trying to get the employees to do something. And without fail, the managers will come in, and at some point the managers will say, please do this thing, and the employees will say why, and the managers will say, because I'm the boss. And when you're an outside observer watching it, it is the most unsatisfying, obviously flawed approach to getting anybody to do anything. But yet we're still just prone to do that. And so I love all of these benefits that you're talking about. It elevates the status of the person by taking a few minutes to explain to them, or maybe not even a few minutes, maybe it's just a few seconds. Educates them, empowers them, helps them see the big picture. Just so many amazing benefits.
One of the things that I think your example illustrates is this fallacy that we have about explaining why. People feel like if they have to explain, then maybe someone isn't trusting their judgment, or it somehow diminishes how much power they have. So I'm the boss. You do it because I'm the boss, not because there is another reason, a legitimate reason that you should buy into. And so people feel like they will lose some status or power or respect by explaining. And for sure, when you offer an explanation, people do feel invited into the conversation. So they're more likely to sort of question that explanation, or question what are the better, maybe there is a better way to achieve the goal that you set out, or maybe there is a better goal to have. And for sure, you're opening that up. But I think for all the reasons that I mentioned before, so the fallacy is that people think they're going to lose something with that explanation. But in fact, what they think they're going to lose is exactly what they gain. People, they gain others' respect. They gain valuable input, someone who's bought in, who wants to kind of work with them and be cooperative with them, but maybe can offer up their own wisdom and advice, and it gives you an opportunity to sort of appreciate that and learn from that. So I do think that it is, you raise a really good question, like, why is it that people don't do this? And I think that we need to understand that more, and I think part of it might be this fallacy.
What a really cool insight that I've never been able to put into words, or never thought of so clearly, that if I have to explain myself, then it feels like an attack on me, or it can lower my status. But the paradox, of course, is that when we do explain ourselves, we're going to, in most likelihood, get the results that we're seeking anyway. And I'm going to really try to remember this when I manage people, and especially with my kids, because it can just be, so easy. Like, hey, kids, do this, do that. Why? Because I'm your dad. And that's just not satisfying. And we're not going to get the results that we can get. And why not empower and educate and raise people's status if you have the opportunity to do so? So what a cool lesson. Well, any other lessons you'd like to share before we wrap up?
So maybe one more would be that when you follow a fair process, then it will lead to fair outcomes in the long run. So if you're in a relationship, if you're playing the long game, then basically you can focus on the process, make sure you get the process right, and stop trying to control the outcome. And I found this very freeing as a manager, as a leader, because basically it does allow me to sort of pull away from a focus on the outcomes that I want. There's a downside to focusing on outcomes. People will tend to be suspicious of you. They'll think that the outcome that you are advocating is something that will benefit you personally. So they think self-interest is the reason that you're focused on that particular outcome. And then they tend to resist or become less cooperative when you're focused on outcomes. So you'll end up with a lot more conflict than you really want by focusing on outcomes. And outcomes are also inherently limited. So you're more likely to have blind spots and make forecasting errors, which is when you think that you want A, but you really want B, or you'll discover later on that what would have made you happier is B. And so people kind of make those errors all the time when it comes to outcomes of what they think will be desirable or undesirable, and by how much, how, like, whether outcome A is much better or only a little bit better, or maybe not even better at all than outcome B. So all of these problems come with a focus on outcomes. Fair processes people are much more likely to agree on what is a fair process,
Mm.
and they have these lasting benefits where if the process is fair, then everyone thinks that, all right, maybe I'm not going to get what I want now, but if I'm patient, if as long as the process is fair, I can come around and, it'll come around to me. They also know what they have to do to get the outcomes that they deserve, because when the process is fair, then it means that the outcomes that you get will be the ones that you deserve. And so people are going to put in the effort to get a better outcome if they feel like the process is fair. I mean, this comes up for me, whether it's things like grading, how I set up and grade students, whether it's how I handle decision making meetings when I'm leading those meetings, how I manage even with my children. So things like, each kid needs different things, and if I focus on a fair process and not necessarily fair outcomes, then I can help them to get what they need when they need it, and not have a lot of resources wasted, or a sense that each kid, no matter what, feels like you're treating others better than them. So I'd say this fair processes lead to fair outcomes. So let go of the outcome is definitely one of the rules I've lived by.
This is so interesting to me because I have been thinking about this and hearing this idea a lot in sports. Worry about the things you can control, and what can you control in sports. You control your effort and your preparation, but you can't control the outcome. I love this framing of thinking of it in terms of fairness. And one of the quotes that I really like is it says something to the effect of, like all self-help can be boiled down to the idea of think long term. And I really like that. When we're prioritizing the long term, we're probably making a better decision for ourselves. And so by combining the two, by focusing on fair process in the long run, the outcomes are going to take care of themselves. And that's just one less thing that we have to worry about. We can control the process. We have much more control over the process than the outcome. So focus on that. Let the outcome take care of itself. And then the outcome will also be better anyway in the long run, because as you're saying, people are more likely to agree about the fairness of a process than an outcome. So what an interesting idea.
Yeah, I think in sports, it's probably more about effort and effort leading to performance. It's probably more at the individual level. I think that the process outcome relationship is especially useful in social situations where you're going to make a decision or take an action, and you focus on doing that in the fairest way possible, because it kind of brings others in. So I think that that's a great connection to sports and the idea of learning. And I think that there may be two sides of the same coin: the individual level dynamic and the more social dynamic.
Well, I am so grateful that we could have this conversation today. I love these lessons. These are things that uh, one of the reasons I love them especially is because I can apply these in my classroom. I can apply them in my work. I can apply them with my friends, and I can apply them here at home. And so I'm just grateful that you would share a few minutes with me sharing these lessons. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you.